I'm Armand Diaz, here to give you the scoop, the lowdown, the skinny, the straight dope on Mercury Retrograde. Now, about 3 times a year, about every 4 months, Mercury, the planet we associate with communication, travel, and technology, sort of seems to, from our perspective, stop in the sky and go backwards for about 3 weeks, and then he stops and goes forward again. And that period where he's going backwards, that 3 weeks, is known as his retrograde period. A lot of planets retrograde. The sun and the moon don't retrograde, but everybody else does. But Mercury retrograde is something that we seem to know a lot about. It's really kind of one of the astrological things that sort of, you hear people in the drugstore saying, what is Mercury retrograde? Or something like that. So Mercury retrograde is a phenomenon that we're really kind of keenly aware of in our society. Considering that we have such a technologically driven society, that we're online all the time, that we're always walking around with our I got a text message. Since we're always walking around with our cell phones and our Blackberries and our iPods and all of this type of thing, we're really very tuned into this. And when Mercury goes retrograde, we're very, very aware that this is a problem. If we were living in an agrarian society, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But because we're so tuned into technology, it makes a lot of sense that we really have a very hard time with Mercury retrograde. Now, Mercury goes forward, stops, goes backward, that's the retrograde, stops and goes forward again. That means that he goes over the same piece of the sky 3 times, going forward, going backwards, and then going forward again. So, in addition to his retrograde, there's also what's called the shadow period. It's kind of like you're walking from 1st Street to 12th Street, but when you get to 6th Street, you stop, go back to 4th Street, stop, look in the window or something like that, and then go forward again. So you cover the blocks between 4th and 6th Street 3 times, forwards, backwards, and forwards. I'm repeating myself, but Mercury is retrograde. See? What we often see is that as Mercury's in that shadow period, some little issue will come up. Your email doesn't work, or you have a little software problem, maybe something goes on with your car or something like that. During the retrograde, you really have sort of an issue with it. And then after the retrograde, when Mercury's moving forward again, is when the thing will be resolved. So it can kind of be a sort of 3-part installment of the particular issue. As with any retrograde, when Mercury's retrograde, it's really best not to do things that are associated with Mercury. The regular story about Mercury retrograde is don't sign any contracts, try not to buy an automobile, try not to buy a computer or any technological device, and try not to buy software for it. The thing about Mercury retrograde, as with any retrograde, is that we sort of feel compelled to do that thing that is signified by the planet. So, for example, while Mercury was retrograde, I opened up my Facebook page and my Twitter account. I kind of said I really shouldn't be doing this now, but I so much wanted to do it because you feel kind of impelled to do things. I bought a car with Mercury retrograde. I had to buy it. I had no choice. And everything was absolutely fine. Except it turned out to be a 2009 instead of a 2010, and I didn't realize that until I took delivery. That kind of stuff happens. During one Mercury retrograde, a letter was mailed actually on the day that Mercury stationed to go direct after the retrograde, and it arrived at my house, which is 3327. And it was the right street, but it was 3327 instead of 3310. Now, there's nothing, we're not going to blame Mercury for that. I get letters all the time. That's not a retrograde thing. That's just the post office. But here's the thing. I live in Queens, New York, and that letter was mailed from and to Topeka, Kansas. It actually wound up being about 1,000 miles off, in addition to the wrong address. That's a typical Mercury retrograde type of thing. Medical tests, and more seriously, medical tests that are done right around the stations of Mercury, or the results reported right around the stations of Mercury, tend to be a little bit off, and that can be an issue. I've seen that an issue a number of times with clients and also with family members. So any information that you get right around the stations or during the retrograde, you might have to redo it. Redoing things is a very Mercury retrograde type of phenomenon. You do something once, you think it came out okay, you have to redo it. So, big problems sometimes, little problems quite often. What do you do with Mercury retrograde? Well, here's an idea. Don't do too much. Don't buy a new book, reread an old book. Don't buy new software. Notice what you really would like to have and say, gee, that would be great, but don't actually go out and get it. You may have to deal with some repairs and so on with cars or whatever. That just happens. It's not really such a big deal in the long run. But with Mercury retrograde, what we're really being told to do is to just back off. A lot of people in their 30s and 40s now are sort of complaining that they have memory loss. And it's not really that there's anything wrong with them. They don't have the yuppie Alzheimer's or whatever. The thing is that we're taking in so much information all the time that there's no downtime, there's no background in order to process the information. So what Mercury retrograde is telling us to do is to stop taking in so much information, stop putting out so much information, let things settle a little bit. Do some nonverbal stuff, play some music, listen to some music, go to a movie, do something, meditate. Do something like maybe make a painting or get some clay and make a sculpture. Do something that is not so verbal, not so in your head, not so online. I mean, of course, you should continue to watch integral astrology videos, but back off a little bit. And as a matter of fact, it would be a great idea if we could all take a little bit of time every day to meditate, to back off from our world, to not check email on quite such a... Let me get that one, though. That looks like it might be interesting. No, that can wait. It would be a good idea if we each took some time each day in order to learn to back off from things. Do a little qigong, do a little tai chi, do a little yoga, do something that's nonverbal. And if you kind of get in the swing of that, when Mercury retrograde comes around, it won't be such a big deal.